and they continue to shift as the Philippine sea plate moves westward at around 80 millimeters a year. Through the forces of orogeny that form great mountain chains, Taiwan's peaks stand taller every day. Islands transfix us, their mythologies tied as much to their isolation as to imagination. Long-sought Ithaca, or the seaport in A Tempest, the islands I know from stories can be both real and fanciful. Material places of rock and soil, they come laden with the ideological weight of Edens and Arcadias, with visions of paradise. The Chinese coastline is littered with islands close at hand, easy to reach, knowable. But for centuries, those in the distance across the Taiwan Strait or the East China Sea remain treacherous to reach and explore. It's easy to imagine how they might have been idealized, or likewise abhorred for their distance from Chinese civilization. In Chinese myth, Penglai, described as both a mountain and an island, was the home of the immortals, blessed with cups that never ran dry, with rice bowls that never emptied. In the 3rd century BC, the first emperor of a unified China sought the mythic island, sailing his ships to the east. It is said that the emperor's emissaries found Japan instead. But Penglai is also one of the traditional names for Taiwan. It was for this wealth of natural resources that Qing explorers first ventured to the island that was renowned for its abundance. In 1697, the colonial scribe Yu Yonghe traveled in search of sulfur. In his journey along the coast, led by indigenous guides and servants, he described rice grains the size of beans, and island crops providing perhaps twice the harvest of the mainland. Coconuts could be split and used as cups for wine. He wrote that Taiwan's fruit, plentiful but mostly unfamiliar to the voyagers, would spoil on the journey back to the mainland. The island was vital and abundant, but entirely unto itself. For those from the continent, these eastern archipelagos were brimming with life, mountains in a turbulent sea. But unlike the immortal islands of myth, Taiwan belonged to the material realm, a living world on a fault-ridden terrain. This is a story of that island, and it is also a story of family. Language has become a home. In English, I find my mind, and in German, my present life in Berlin. But my earliest words in childhood were in Mandarin, my mother's tongue. I know them still. Gou, dog, 老虎, tiger, ai, love, and especially 婆, grandmother, gong, grandfather. Po and Gong had moved from China, from homesteads no one had left in generations, to Taiwan, where they lived for nearly 4 decades, unable to return to the mainland. They arrived in the years after the Second World War, along with more than 1 million other mainland Chinese, when Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist, or Kuomintang, government fled to Taiwan at the end of the Civil War. Taiwan had changed hands repeatedly. Though its indigenous inhabitants had lived there for thousands of years, the arrival of the Spanish and the Dutch East India Company in the 17th century spurred a continuous scramble for the island. The Dutch and Spanish both set up trading posts on the western shores and were succeeded by Chinese colonists who held the island for over 2 centuries. After the First Sino-Japanese War, Japan ruled the island from 1895 until 1945, when it was transferred back to China. When my grandparents arrived, the decades of cultural separation were an even greater gulf to cross. People like my grandparents and their descendants became known in Taiwan as Waishangren, literally people from outside the province, meaning mainlanders, a term so imprecise that even now I wonder how to explain our origins. Our history stretched across places imprecisely until our borders grew too hazy to define. Eventually, with my mother, my grandparents immigrated to Canada, where I was born. My grandfather, nearing his death, left Canada and returned to Taiwan. I grew older and then moved away myself, first to Britain, where my father is from, and then to Germany, where I made my life as a